Hi, my name is Beatrice, and I'm going to be analyzing passage 2 from the Crucible. The context of this passage occurs in Act 1, where we have previously seen Paris witnessing Abigail and the girls dancing in the woods. And Ruth Putnam has fallen into deep sleep and she will not awake. So Abigail and the girls have been accused of committing witchery, and Mr. Putnam, he calls in Reverend Hale to solve the situation. The main idea of this passage is that Rebecca Nurse tries to calm Salem, as she predicts that the mass hysteria is about to break out if Reverend Hale calls the court into Salem. The first effect I have been able to identify within passage 2 is stage direction, and an example of this is in line 1 when Paris wondrously says, "What do you make of it, Rebecca?" The effect on the audience is that it forms an understanding that it's a serious issue which needs to be solved, and people are wondering about Ruth Putnam's health and her condition, and if she will awake, because if she doesn't awake, then Reverend Hale will be called in, and it will lead to a bigger situation. The second effect is sentence structure / stigomythia. In line 19, Putnam says, "There be children dying, the village mister." And in line 23, Proctor says, "He may turn his head, but not to hell." And the sentence structure, it says that the longer the sentence is, it's Rebecca Nurse that's trying to calm the Salem down and to calm the people in the room. But the shorter sentences allows to show the audience that there's tension and conflict, and that allows the reader to understand the tension that's in there, and it builds suspension for the next acts. In the third effect is foreshadowing. Examples of this are in line 23, that says, "I think you'd best send Reverend Hale back as soon as you come." That's by Rebecca Nurse. And in line 25, she says, "I think we ought to rely on the doctor now, and good prayer." This gives the reader a hint of what is about to happen, which can intrigue them to continue reading, but it also builds suspension, as Rebecca Nurse has identified that there is a problem here, and that if Reverend Hale comes into Salem, he's most likely to call in the courts, and that will therefore set off mass hysteria, and it will lead to the hangings of several innocent people. This relates back to the relationship between the government and the church back when this occurred, and as the government's laws were based on the laws of the Bible, you can see that if something with a devil occurs or where someone is possessed by a devil, you immediately call in a priest to try to solve this issue and try to find the man responsible or the one who has interacted with the devil, which will then be hung, which Rebecca Nurse is foreshadowing is about to happen. And this relates back to the author's context and the Red Scare and McCarthyism, where McCarthy started accusing people of being communists without having proper evidence, which caused mass hysteria in the United States. And it relates back to the Salem witch trials, as it's the exact same thing that happens, that you're accusing people of committing witchery without having any evidence, which also causes mass hysteria in Salem.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. There's a contrast between Rebecca Nurse and the rest of the characters in the play, in the passage, based on the length of their lines. Why do you think Miller has developed that contrast?
When Rebecca Nurse speaks, she tries to calm them by explaining what calling in Reverend Hale will lead to, and both Paris and Proctor and Mr. and Mrs. Putnam kind of snaps back at her, and it creates tension as they're yelling or angrily speaking short lines.
Mm-hmm. One last question for you. Proctor says to Putnam, this society will not be a bag to swing around your head, Mr. Putnam. What do you think he means by that?
Can you repeat the question?
Proctor says,
Yeah.
this society will not be a bag to swing around your head, Mr. Putnam. What do you think he means?
Maybe it can indicate that as Mr. Paris is a priest, that he has power and authority in the community of Salem, and that he cannot just do as he wishes. Maybe.
Okay, thank you very much.